Hello, and welcome to episode 14 of The Smallest Thing. I'm Lisa Manterfield. I'm back this week from a much-needed staycation. It was so good to be able to take a break from the monotony of lockdown and change things up a bit. We took a lot of long walks, went out to the coast and our favourite local forest. We did some fun cooking, including making a pork pie, a very traditional English food, from scratch. We bought a whole salmon right off the fishing boat and had a really fun night out at the drive-in movies. I slept in, read a lot, and also took care of some household stuff I've been putting off. I even got tested for COVID to contribute to my county statistics. All in all, it was a welcome break, and we managed to do it all while staying safe. But as things are starting to open up in my area, we're also seeing a surge in new cases, so we're still moving cautiously. This week, I'll tell you more about how I blended historical research with present-day news as I wrote the book. But first, something big is happening in Ems Village. Find out what it is in this week's episode of The Smallest Thing. Welcome to the serialized audiobook, The Smallest Thing, written by Lisa Manterfield, read for you by Charlie Sanderson.
Chapter 14, Tuesday, August the 2nd. Bolting down the stairs, I find Dad hanging out of the front door. He pulls me next to him, and I follow his shocked gaze out into the early morning street. A convoy of ambulances moves through the village, all heading toward the cricket pitch. Scattered in between and heading in the same direction are groups of our neighbours and friends. Where are they going? I ask. Are they leaving? For a delusional moment, I think that perhaps the quarantine has been lifted and we'll all be free to go back to our lives. But even as I allow the idea to dance a jig in my mind, I sense that I'm about as far from the truth as is humanly possible. There is fear in the air, a tight, sharp cut of dread and uncertainty. I don't know where everyone is going, and I pick up the feeling that neither do they. Dad and I step into the street to find out what's happening, holding back so as not to get too close. As if the stream of people contains some unseen force that could pull us along if we don't keep a safe distance. Across the street, two suited paramedics wheel a sealed bubble gurney toward a waiting ambulance. From the spill of dark curls protruding from the white blanket, it's clear that Mrs. Wainwright is being taken away. Her face has the now familiar yellow pallor. Her red-rimmed eyes stare skyward. She's followed closely by her husband, who walks from the house unassisted. He moves, as if he's off to the rugby club for a practice game, his broad shoulders square to his loping gait. In other words, he does not look in the least bit sick. My fear has come true. They are rounding up the sick and rounding up the healthy too. Does this mean they'll be coming for us? As they leave, a suited crew moves in. One alien sprays a few feet inside the door of the Wainwrights' cottage from a large white canister he carries on his back. When he's done, another crew member seals the edges of the door and sprays a large red X across the middle. Mr. Wainwright follows his wife's ambulance into the parade. Around the village, several cottage doors have been sealed and sprayed with red X's. Others bear white X's. It's not clear to me yet what the difference is, but I know the red one is something I never want to see on my door. What are they doing? I asked Dad. Where are they taking everyone? To a new isolation unit, he says. Too many sick people for the village hall. Mr. Wainwright doesn't look sick. No. Dad offers nothing more reassuring. Unconcerned by the fact that I'm dressed only in pyjamas, I go with Dad as he follows the caravan down to the cricket pitch, where the tents I'd seen being built are now complete. Across the pitch, 3 enormous rectangular marquees stand side by side, each fenced off from the other by a double row of orange plastic webbing. At the front entrance of each is a green shed that looks like a double-wide portaloo, along with a plastic trough, also green, that I'm guessing is for washing off boots. At opposite corners of the fenced-in area are 2 additional tents. The line of people files into one, suggesting it's the entrance. By process of elimination, the other must be the exit, but I doubt it's intended that anyone will walk out that way. Beyond that tent, a high screen has been hammered into the ground, making whatever lies behind it invisible to us. Whatever is back there, it's the final destination for the dead. The entire camp is fenced in by more plastic webbing, with an additional orange boundary about 10 feet outside that. It's like its own mini-city, a busy hive of suited workers buzzing around with an air of competence and efficiency. But unlike an ordinary city, there is something cold and sinister about this. Dad and I watch as Mrs. Wainwright's bubble gurney is wheeled through a back entrance to the furthest tent. Mr. Wainwright is escorted through the camp's main entrance, reappearing moments later inside the compound, and headed toward the first tent. Some of the others who walk in are directed into the middle tent. It appears that each tent houses patients at different levels of sickness, the third tent clearly being where the sickest and the dying are kept. A family of 4 from higher up the village are divided between tents 1 and 2. The children crying as their parents are pulled apart. An altercation erupts, and suited workers swarm to help. They hesitate, the parents conferring for a moment before agreeing to go their separate ways. The second I get home, I text Deb to ask if she's seen what's going on. She doesn't answer. I'm overcome with a terrible fear that Deb and her family have been taken away. I pull on clothes and run back out into the village, ignoring my dad's warnings to stay inside. I'm shocked to see how many of the houses are painted with white or red X's. Still running, I scan the lines of ambulances and walkers, looking for Deb's familiar black hair. I'm relieved to see she isn't there. I hit my phone's call icon and listen as it rings. 4 rings later, I hear Deb's voice. "This is not the Deb you're looking for. Move on or leave a message." And then a beep. "Deb," I say. "All hell has broken loose. If you're okay, send up a flare. Just let me know, okay? Ciao for now." As I sprint past my house and round the corner to Briar Lane, I see 2 people outside of Deb's cottage. I can't tell from this distance, but they appear to be Deb's dad, Mr. Elliot, and Tommy, her brother. As I get closer, I can see they're hauling boxes. For a brief moment of panic, I think they're moving out, but of course that's not possible. From the way Tommy struggles with his box, I can tell it's heavy. I trot up to see if I can help. Tommy sees me first, but before I can offer my assistance, Mr. Elliot turns and glares. I give a friendly wave and peer over my mask. He looks like he doesn't recognise me. "It's me, Mr. Elliot. Emmett." Without waiting for his response, I walk over to Tommy. "Which way are we going?" I ask, bracing a corner of the box. But when I look up, Tommy and Mr. Elliot have both pulled back. "We don't need your help, thanks." Mr. Elliot doesn't make eye contact with me. My first thought is that he's worried about contagion. I let go of the box, and my hand unconsciously moves to my mask, pressing it closer to my face. Then it dawns on me that the boxes have official stickers on them, like the supply boxes we receive each week. Dad and I are rationed to 2 a week, but these boxes hold enough supplies for a month, enough to get through the rest of the quarantine. "Wait," I squeak. "What are you doing?" "Go home, Emmett," Mr. Elliot says. "Where did these come from?" "Emmett, you really should just go home." The sharp tone of his voice makes me pull away. I've never heard him speak this way to anyone, let alone me. Deb's dad is funny dad, laughing dad. "Who wants ice cream?" Dad. This man is none of those. This man is, "Nothing comes between me and my family," Dad. My stomach gives a sickening lurch at the realisation that I've just helped imprison my best friend. "I want to see Deb," I say, squaring against him. Mr. Elliot scans my face as if I'm some kind of raving lunatic that he can't comprehend. "Where's your dad, Emmett?" he says. "At home." Mr. Elliot's face softens. "You need to go home too, Emmett." As if he's talking a child into letting go of something she's not supposed to have. "Someone's been going around ratting out people with symptoms. Well, I'm not standing for it. My wife isn't infected and I'm not letting anyone take her away." So Helena is sick. I want to remind him that if she doesn't have the virus, she doesn't have to go anywhere. Assure him that it's probably something else, that whatever Helena has will pass and she'll be okay, and so will he, and so will Deb. But Mr. Elliot's face is a picture of such sadness and resignation that I'm overcome with an urge to throw my arms around him. I'm not a hugger at the best of times, less so now it's become dangerous. But I suddenly feel a fierce solidarity with him and his determination to preserve some semblance of dignity for his family. I grab him by the arm and squeeze. "Tell Deb I'll say hi." It's such a pointless thing to say when I have so much I want to tell my oldest and best friend, but Mr. Elliot only nods, and I watch as he and his box disappear from view. Before I turn to leave, I glance up at Deb's bedroom window just in time to catch a glimpse of her face in the shadows. I hold up my hand to wave, but she pulls back behind the curtain. Staring at the empty space where she stood, I'm struck with the thought that this glimpse could be the last time I see her. It's totally morbid, but not impossible. What if Helena does have the virus? What if Mr. Elliot is sealing his whole family inside with this thing? I wait, willing her to come back so we can share some kind of farewell, just in case. When she doesn't come, I whisper, "Goodbye," into the air between us. Suddenly, hiding in my room until this is over doesn't seem like such a bad idea. Better there than out in this. I trudge home to wait, although, for what? I'm not sure.
Welcome back. When I first began writing this book, I pulled a lot from history and adapted it into my modern-day story. The use of vinegar as a disinfectant, for example, was a detail I took from historical records of the Eme Plague, as were the crosses painted on the doors in this chapter. During the Great Plague of the 1600s, red crosses, or plague crosses, were painted on the front door of an infected person's home. The house was sealed, condemning the inhabitants to almost certain death. In London, roughly 15% of the population died during the plague, and the dead were taken away in carts during the night and laid to rest in mass graves. "Bring out your dead" was a cry heard nightly in the streets. Around the time I was doing the first major rewrite of the book, Ebola broke out in West Africa and was at the forefront of news headlines that year. It meant that much of the research I needed for the book was right there. Bubble City, which is first introduced in this chapter, came into the story after I saw a layout of an isolation unit in Time magazine. The layout of the 3 levels, the decontamination showers, and the protocol for admission all came from the real-life events taking place in Africa. Sometimes this kind of news can seem unreal when it happens so far away, but to imagine it happening in a place and to people familiar to me really brought home that reality. Now, of course, we're all living it. What the Ebola outbreak also gave me was the very personal stories of aid workers, medical staff, volunteers, and patients. On my story inspiration board, I had a photo of a relief worker in full PPE bathing a young child. That photo really brought home to me the absolute isolation that patients would feel, and how lonely they would be. It also highlighted the courage of the health workers who put themselves in danger to save the lives of others. I hope I was able to convey all of that in the book. Next week, Em is called in for a contact tracing survey as the government tries to contain the outbreak. I'll also tell you about some fascinating research that was conducted on the ancestors of the Eme Plague survivors. So until next week, stay safe. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Smallest Thing. To make sure you don't miss next week's episode, you can subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and more. If you'd like to support the show, please leave a review and share this series with others you think might enjoy it. If you're on Instagram, tag me there at LisaManterfield_, or follow me on Facebook at author Lisa Manterfield and Twitter at Lisa Manterfield. My newsletter subscribers are always the first to know about my news, events, upcoming releases, giveaways, and more. Sign up for monthly delivery at lisamanterfield.com/subscribe and get your complimentary copy of Love, Loss and Letting Go, 3 of my short stories. Thanks to Justin Joseph for producing and editing this show, and to Ketsa.uk for the music. That's all for this episode. Thanks for listening.